We hope you had a good Veterans Day week last week. We are back at it with our regular programming this week. Tonight, we are focusing on, do you know what we're focusing on? The war that never happened. World War III. World War III should have happened in Europe. It should have happened in Germany, and it did not. Instead, we had a Cold War that put us right at the brink of a hot war, and it never happened in Europe. So we're focusing on the Cold War in Europe, specifically the 31st anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. And I would venture to say that a plurality, if not majority, of veterans who are going to join us on the Zoom side will have been veteran sailors, Marines, soldiers who trained to fight the Russians in Europe. And it never happened. And I'm just so curious about that, and I know that we're going to have at least 3 people who were in Berlin or in Germany for the fall of the Berlin Wall, and what a surprise it was and what a change it was. And I'm looking forward to hearing their stories. It happened 31 years ago on November 9th, so we're a week late. But November 9th turns out to have been you have Veterans Day coming up, you have the Marine Corps birthday the next day. There was another anniversary, November 9th. I can't remember what it was.
Wasn't your wedding anniversary, was it?
No, it was not. It was not my wedding anniversary. My wedding anniversary is
Ellie? Can you throw him a bone?
And I know this one.
Gotta look up my tattoo. July 3rd. July 3rd.
That's my dad's birthday.
Really?
Yes.
How about that?
How about that? My mom's is 7-11, the easiest number to remember.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
Free Slurpee Day.
Yeah.
At 7-Eleven.
Free Slurpee Day. And you better not get your mom that for her birthday. She'll see right through that. Here's a Slurpee, Ma.
Which flavor do you want, Ma?
Oh, this is great. And Ellie, you have our theme song all geared up?
Yes, I do.
I love the new theme song.
Yeah, it's a good tune. It's a little more relaxed than the last time. So we'll go ahead and start it.
The last one was jangly, kind of jangly. Yeah.
I want to set that as my alarm to wake up to.
Oh, definitely. Good to see you, Henry. Hey, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for our Veterans Breakfast Club Happy Hour. I'm Todd. I'm the director of the Veterans Breakfast Club. And tonight we were just saying before we went live here on Zoom that I think the theme of today is stories from veterans who were trained to fight the war that never happened. And that is, of course, World War III in Europe. I mean, that was the war that many of you grew up expecting to happen. You were trained for it. And it ended up, the Cold War in Europe did not get hot the way everybody expected it to. So I put a call out last week to see if we could get veterans who served, especially in Germany, during the Cold War, during the fall of the fall of the Berlin Wall, which happened 31 years ago last week. And I know we have a nice representation of veterans who served in various branches of service, both before the fall of the wall, and some were there for the fall of the Berlin Wall, and during the Cold War. But let me introduce, we have Ellie, she's engineering the show. Hello, Ellie from Chicago.
Hello.
We have Sean. How are you doing, Sean?
I'm great. How's everybody doing?
Good. And I want to jump into our stories. We have an illustrious collection of veterans here with us tonight. I want to jump into our stories, but I do want to make a couple of announcements, and a couple of new things have come up, and I want to share them with you. We're really excited here at the Veterans Breakfast Club because our first, as you know, we've done one feature-length documentary called We Left as Brothers, which was about our trip back to Vietnam with 6 Vietnam veterans who served in country. Well, I am happy to announce that it is going to air on WQED TV, Channel 13 here in Pittsburgh. the PBS affiliate here in Pittsburgh, on Saturday, November 21st at 10 p.m., which is actually past my bedtime, but I'm going to stay up and watch it for sure and enjoy it. So if you certainly live in Pittsburgh, you could just watch it on Channel 13. If you don't live in Pittsburgh, you can stream it at wqed.org. It could be streamed. And I do encourage you to watch it. I know we have at least two of the veterans who are in the program with us tonight. We have Larry Woods. I saw that he's in the house. And we have Ben Wright, who's in the house. So please do give it a look on Saturday at 10 p.m. on WQED. The other announcement I want to make is that the next day on Sunday, we have a really special guest for Greatest Generation Live. We have Gail Halverson, who just turned 100 years old. And Gail was a pilot in World War II. He was a transport pilot, but he achieved international fame for something that he did during the Berlin airlift of 1948 and 1949. Gail Halverson was a pilot in the Berlin airlift, and he took it upon himself, seeing some starving kids outside of Tempelhof Airport in Berlin. He took it upon himself to gather all the candy that he could from his rations, tie little handkerchiefs around them as parachutes, and toss them out the window to the kids below, the kids in West Berlin. And he became known as the Candy Bomber. And you know, kids would just write letters to the airbase where he was stationed, asking that he drop candy on their houses. And it was probably the single greatest individual act of Cold War diplomacy of the 20th century. I mean, it was amazing the impact it had and how it's still remembered, and he is still remembered and very much celebrated in Germany today. It turned out to be a wonderful piece of diplomacy, and it was his initiative that started all pilots throwing candy out the windows for the kids of West Berlin. It was a great kind of diplomatic international publicity coup. And he's going to be joining us on Sunday at 4 p.m. for Greatest Generation Live. So I'm very excited about that. Again, he's very hale and hearty, and he just turned 100 years old. And I know that he has a lot of wisdom to share. I know that just from reading interviews with him. So if you can make it, if you could join us on Sunday here at this Zoom site or on Facebook Live for Greatest Generation Live at 4 p.m., boy, you'll be in for a treat. Speaking of a treat, we also have an end of year. We're calling it an end of year celebration. It's in lieu of our gala. You know, every year we have a Veteran Voices Gala where we celebrate our Veteran Voices of the Year. This year we can't do an in-person gala, so we're having a year-end Zoom celebration, and it's going to be a dinner. It's going to be a dinner with MREs. Again, we did the MRE dinner in July, which was a lot of fun. We're doing it again, and this year this time we're offering some international MREs. So you can, if you want to play it safe, go ahead, get your United States MREs. You know, we'll send you your taco or your beef brisket.
We won't call you boring. We won't
call you boring at all. But if you want to take a chance, and it's not a big risk, but it's just, if you want to take a chance, order an international MRE. That's what I'm going to order. As you can see behind me, we have German MREs, we have Russian MREs, we have Lithuanian, we have Polish, we have French, we have Chinese, we have Japanese, and then we're also going to have beer and wine. And for an extra $10, you can have beer and wine. So it's $40 for a US MRE, $60 for an international MRE, and it's going to come in a gift box. We're putting other things in the box. VBC swag and other things, and then $10 for beer or wine, and we're gonna have a wine tasting at beer and wine tasting at 6:30 if you want to join us for that. But I thought this was funny. I've been ordering these international MREs that are coming in from literally Russia and Poland, and they come in, and I guess I hadn't really realized that I don't read Polish or Russian or Japanese. And so here's one of here's the Japanese. The Japanese rations have a reputation for being excellent. Very, very good. I got 13 of these Japanese rations. And so I get these Japanese rations, and here's the label. Here's the ingredients label. You know, I have to.
Anybody want to take a shot?
Anybody here read Japanese? I do not. So I took my phone, I downloaded the Google Translate app. I pointed it at these, Japanese figures, and I got this great translation. So I could tell you pretty much what you're going to get. You're going to get boiled meat with tomato. And I love how I don't know if you've anybody out there who has used Google Translate, but it adjusts the translation in real time. Like it keeps searching for better words. So you could see that you're getting here boiled meat with tomato, but sometimes they just, you know that they got some words wrong. So for example, anybody who orders this dinner, I'm sure, are not going to have mosquitoes as an ingredient in your MRE. I can just promise you that. And then also, I do know that these are Best by 2021, and that date is wrong. So I assure you that date is wrong. So I just wanted to assure everybody of that. So I do hope you can join us. We have, Ellie, if you could put the Eventbrite link that people could register for the event here on the Zoom side and on the Facebook side, that would be wonderful because you could buy a ticket there. So please do join us Saturday, 7 p.m., December 5th for our year-end celebration. It's gonna be fun. We're gonna do some trivia. We're gonna do some funny stories, and we'd love everybody to join us if you can. There are also sponsorship opportunities. If anybody would like to sponsor the event, we'd love to have a sponsor or two. And speaking of sponsors, this should get a sponsor. The Scuttlebutt. Our Scuttlebutt is really interesting. I learn something every week. The Scuttlebutt that just came out today, Sean, is focused or not focused on, but one of the topics that you cover in this week's Scuttlebutt. This is the second part of a two-parter on the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. I should let people know about that. You've been going week by week and covering each branch of service. And for some reason, you thought the Marine Corps was worthy of 2 episodes?
James, he held my feet to the fire, so yes.
Okay, all right. But the other branches of service are not worthy of 2 episodes?
I didn't say that.
Okay, all right. But I loved you and James walk through the firing of this howitzer, a video of the howitzer that James, worked on and was in, part of the firing battery during the Iraq War in Afghanistan. And it was just so much fun to hear him speak with such eloquence and passion about this piece of equipment that he, knew in such intimate detail. The other thing, Sean, that I found really interesting that you discussed, I guess not this week, but the week before, last week, was these terms, which I've been working with veterans for 12 years. I've heard Army people say hoo-ah and Marines say oorah. I've never quite known what it means or when you say it or why they say it. And it's just kind of intimidating. And so I have never asked about it. And I'd love that you asked about it. And you've got what?
Yeah. I mean, we always do like a phrase of the week. And, I think the one that sticks out most to me out of all the cadences, all the branches was oorah for the Marines. So I figured having some Marines on the program, I would ask them about that. But in researching it, realized that that each branch has their own cadence. Oorah seems to be the most well known of them to me. But they said, oorah, you're gonna try to ask somebody a question. If you want them to do something and you want to make sure they understand it, you're gonna, oorah, or you might shorten it and go rah, and make sure that rah is your response. And yeah, Jeff.
I was just going to comment from the HUA side on the Army side, and it's probably the same in the other services that's a positive response. If you instead of saying yes sir or whatever it is, if somebody says how about another beer, HUA. Whatever it is. Okay, you understand what I'm talking about. Hua. Yeah. So it's always a positive response to something.
So, Jeff, are you permitted to say it instead of yes, sir?
No. That's any time. Usually the time when he's speaking in front of a bunch of troops, the commander will say, do I get a hua? And everybody say hua, and things like that. But yes, sir. When you're in front of the boss and that, it's yes, sir, no, sir, I don't know, sir. But when he's out in the crowd, he'll say, give me a hua, and things like that.
And they're very specific too. So like oorah is only really said by Marine Corps and Seabees. Hua is Army, JROTC, and maybe sometimes the Marine Corps and Navy. But mainly the Army. Huya is the Navy and the Coast Guard and the Navy SEALs. And then the Air Force decided that theirs is the only one that you actually can, it's an acronym, correct? So HUA meaning, what is that? Heard, understood, acknowledged.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I found it incredibly interesting talking with James and Josh Cannon and Haya about what they thought of "oorah" being in the Marine Corps, and it seems like it's a very guttural thing. It's like, it's a way to get everybody on the same page. It's camaraderie. It's it's acknowledgement. It's encouragement. So if you're doing pull-ups and you're everybody's around you, "oorah, oorah," like it's there's a lot of energy behind it. I'm getting energized just saying
a lot of energy behind it. Yeah, that's it. So I've heard Marines say it. I've heard Army veterans say it, and Army personnel say it. I've got to say, I don't remember hearing Navy say "hoo-yah" very often. Can any Navy or Coast Guard veterans, because apparently there's something in the Coast Guard also. Yes. Okay, Chris, how are you? I haven't seen you in a while.
I know I've been absent for a little bit here. Forgive me.
Do you know where why you've been absent? It took you that long to shave your beard.
No, I was gone before that.
Okay.
I never ever remember using any phraseology like that. To me, "hoo-yah" is something you would, if you're on guard duty, you would challenge somebody saying, "Hey, hoo-yah," find out who they are. But sorry, that was a bad joke. But no.
I'm gullible. I fell right for that. I was
Sean and I are two of the most gullible people in the world. Never make a joke like that, because we will write it down and we will blog on it.
No, I think as special warfare and Navy SEALs and combined forces and joint operations, maybe some linguistics like that had developed, but I do not recall anywhere in my reserve duties or active duty having a call like that.
Yeah, Ida May or Dale. Yeah.
I never heard anything like that. I don't understand it myself.
Okay, that makes me feel better. Chad doesn't understand. You didn't either. Okay.
No.
Here's my theory. Here's what I think happened. I think the Marines and the Army did it first. And then the other branches of service thought, we need our thing. Maybe. And so maybe it's a more recent thing. Now, how about the Air Force?
Larry,
Ben, Jim, John? No, see, John Kramer. Okay. This is my theory.
Who's on? We never, I know the HUA, I thought that was, Ben might be able to help me out with this. I thought that was more of an academy type thing.
Yeah.
But the Air Force, we don't go around high-fiving and doing that. So I'll go on my Air Force thing and say we didn't need to do that. The Army and the Marines needed to keep their morale up. You didn't need to have it kept up by having a yell, some kind of words to another fellow, because we didn't need that. So that's yeah.
And I love. And I love how the Air Force is the only branch that actually makes it an acronym and explains to the airmen what it actually means. Heard, understood, acknowledged. The other branches don't do that.
I don't know where it came from. Maybe Ben or someone else can tell me, because I don't know.
Yeah,
I have no idea. It was after my time.
And John Kramer, after your time too?
Never heard of it before.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
and
we never used
the nail on the head. So Larry hit the nail on the head. Air Force and Navy, that's like a battle cry, or that's a rush of adrenaline, running into combat. And Air Force and Navy had no need for that. Plus, the normal response for a sailor to any command or the end of a discussion is, "Aye, aye, sir."
Aye, aye. That's right.
But yeah, that was not necessary in our services.
Jim Jameson, you never heard of it. Did you?
Never heard of it at all.
Okay. All right. Tom Stevenson has his hand up. Hey, Tom, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I thought I'd throw in a little bit of Navy side on this. I'm a Navy submariner. I never did a hoo-yah, but we certainly did lots of ooga oogas. particularly after drinks had been served many times as part of the submariner song. But yeah, I don't think we ever did a hoo-yah thing. But Ooga Ooga was definitely part of the submariner song.
No,
Oh.
Aruga. No,
That's the dive
Aruga.
signal. It's the
Yeah.
dive signal.
Mike Allen was a submariner too. You submariners, I know, are a special breed. I know that. I've learned that. I learned that in Bremerton, Washington, when I hung out with a bunch of you. Mike Allen, and Mike Chirac. We have 3 submariners. We have 3 submariners on tonight. That is something, huh? Okay.
Peter Then says the Army HUA stands for I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I'm sure as hell enthusiastic about it.
Well, Sean, I'm grateful that you sorted that out for us because I felt I got some clarity on what hoorah and hoo-yah were. And so my theory, the theory that I'm going to go with until it's disproven is that Army Marines came up with it first. Navy and Air Force felt like they had to come up with something, and so they invented those 2 cadences that are, fairly recently. And I have to say, I know we have a rule. Sean and I have talked about this rule in the Veterans Breakfast Club. We don't take cheap shots ever. However, I saw something online on the internet about these battle cries that I just felt like I had to share. Now, don't kill the messenger, all right?
Prep your vegetables.
Yeah. Military war cries. United States Army, hoo-ah. United States Navy, hoo-yah. United States Marines, oorah. And Department of the Air Force, ouch, I got a paper cut. All right, moving right along.
I was going to say, Todd, that one thing about, at least in the Army and like the others, when you hear ooh and everybody's saying hoo in the formation, there's nobody saying and stuff like that. It just, I don't know what I'm doing. Let's go. Let's go. Okay.
Yes.
It's just automatic. It's just automatic.
And Todd, don't forget that Ben, Larry, and I know where you live.
I'm safe. I'm safe right now.
That is true.
Don't bet, buddy. Don't bet.
Sean is in an undisclosed location.
I'm in a bunker.
Hey, Todd,
Todd,
one other thing before you get on to the next subject. I was just going to compliment the show last night that I was lucky to tune in on. That was the one on Bill Malden. You guys did a great job on that. That was really informational, and I really didn't know that much about Bill. I knew he was a cartoonist, but I didn't know that about his personal life.
Oh,
really
thank
great.
you.
Great
Thank
show.
you for saying that. Yeah, thank you. We instead of having Greatest Generation live yesterday afternoon, we preempted it. I was on the History Happy Hour with 2 really good historians who did a great job, I think, engaging a discussion about Bill Malden and his World War II work. And I think, Ellie, we're going to be able to, well, I guess we could direct people to it. It wasn't not on our Facebook. Okay, very good. Ed Blank, what were you going to say?
Just 2 things. First of all, I think all your misspellings, all of those words are misspelled. My sense is that the Marine oorah was Hoorah. And the second thing is that as a lifelong moviegoer, I thought the Marines were an invention of Hollywood until about 5 years ago when I joined Veterans Breakfast Club and I learned all this stuff. Because I never saw one the whole time I was in the Army. And I have to apologize to the Marines here for what I confess is my ignorance.
Thank you, Ed, for trying to rouse Dan Vaughn from his. I appreciate that. Oh, this is so great. And I want to say a special hello to our special guest, Henry Shopke from Madison, Wisconsin. Hello, Henry. How are you?
Hi, I'm good.
Henry is 13 years old, and he's been joining us at almost every one of our events. He's been, engaged with your stories, loves your stories. He and I have been emailing back and forth a little bit. And Henry, actually, I'm going to email you tomorrow about something. I'd love for you to get involved in our programs here. But I wanted to say, Henry, feel free, and you'll see that he's wearing a Veterans Breakfast Club hat. Henry, feel free, Henry, to just ask questions of anytime you have a question for a veteran, just, speak up and ask it. And Chad Riddle, you're holding up a nice book there, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm holding up a real nice book, and if Jeff wants to know more about it, I'm offering to sell this to Jeff for $10. And if he wants a forged author signature, I'll sell it to him for $5.
I was going to say, make a nice Christmas gift to me, Chad. That'd be great.
Yeah, it would.
Your wife will love it. Your wife will love it. Yeah, definitely. All right, let's move beyond this nonsense, shall we? This is great, though. This is the kind of banter. This is what we're looking for here. You'll may remember, some of you will remember 31 years ago. I certainly do. It's etched in my memory. It was the great, stunning event, I think, of my life. Truly, I do not think that's an understatement. That's the fall of the Berlin Wall that seemed to happen all of a sudden on November 9th, 1989. And think back to how the world changed so rapidly in the next few months. It was less than a year later that Germany was reunited. And then that same year, most of Eastern Europe became free. And then, of course, Christmas 1991, the Soviet Union itself collapsed. And that was it. That was the Cold War. The Cold War ended in a space of about 2 years. And this was a, cataclysmic showdown between two great superpowers for 45 years. And I always like to say, I would say to my classes that, history doesn't have many examples of two great superpowers on the verge of war for 45 years and yet never going to war directly, only through third-party client states like Korea and Vietnam, but not directly. The Russian, the Red Army and the American Army never faced off in Europe like everybody expected they might. And it really is remarkable that it ended. And I just thought I would love to have a conversation tonight about the Cold War, about those of you who served during that period, what you saw your mission as, how were you trained to fight, what was your expectation growing up and when you were in the military about the when the Cold War might become hot. And I know that we have two people with us tonight here who were in Germany when the Berlin Wall fell. We might have more. One of them is Ben Wright here. Ben was a pilot. Ben, where were you stationed when on November 9th, 1989?
I was Deputy Combat Support Group Commander at Bitburg Air Base in Germany.
And what do you remember about that day? What do you remember about the subsequent days and weeks afterwards?
Well, actually, that day, being the Deputy Base Commander, there were a lot of things that went on with the local community that we went to. And there was an event scheduled for that day. And so we went downtown in Bitburg. And just to listen to the Germans themselves, I mean, they were, after we watched it on TV the night before with all these people sitting on a wall and going back and forth and all those things. And the people in downtown Bitburg, the Burgermeister and everybody, they were in shock. They couldn't believe that it had actually happened. But yet they were joyful, but a little bit skeptical. I think their biggest concern was they were afraid of a drain on the West German economy to support the East. In reality, it was a boom. I went back to Germany again in the late 90s and 98, and the building boom that was going on in Berlin and East Germany, and a lot of the wealth that Germany has today came out of that rebuilding boom. It was amazing.
You also, I think you told me that shortly after the wall came down, you went to East Germany to kind of see what it was like, and you were kind of stunned by a lot of things.
Oh yes. And everything was changing every day. At the time I went, if you wanted to drive in, you had to go to Checkpoint Alpha, which was straight west of Berlin, before you crossed into East Germany, and there was an Autobahn that went. You had to go in and check in. And the first clue that things had even changed even more was went in and the guy, I had my sister and her husband and son with me in the car, and he says, "Does everybody have a U.S. passport?" I said, "Oh, yes, we do." And he said, "Well, put away your flag passes, go right over here to the East German consulate and get an East German visa." and just go. Don't even talk to the Russians. When you get to checkpoint Bravo to enter West Berlin, just go. I says, are you sure? He says, yes. And he says, where are you going from there? I said, well, we're coming back because we're going to go around and go down to Bavaria and down to Austria. He says, you don't have to come back here. You can go straight south out of Berlin. And I kind of looked at him kind of funny. Says, oh, really? You know? And so we did. We went straight south out of Berlin and wound up going a lot of other places. Went to Wittenberg, which any of you know anything about Reformation history is an amazing place. And is before it became the tourist place that it is now. And we went to Wittenberg and all over the place. The most amazing thing was the Russians didn't do anything while they occupied East Germany. The infrastructure had not changed since the late 40s, and a lot of the rebuilding after World War II had never happened. And I was driving a U.S. built Ford, and the people would just look at that car, and you'd stop in a service station to use the facilities, and people just look at you and look at the car and how strange it was and all those sorts of things. And then when I got ready to come back into Germany, I came through what used to be a checkpoint between the two, and you get down between these revetments. They're only wide enough for the car to literally fit through, and all this concertina wire on these big guard towers that only not very long before had been armed guards up there and all those things. And we just drive through there looking at it like, wow, isn't that something? And right back into the former West Germany.
Isn't that amazing? And you mentioned the Ford car. They had cars in East Germany, but they were considered the worst cars ever built, right? The Trabant.
Yeah, the Trabants. And, actually it started opening up. There were a lot of people out of East Germany when the Soviet Union economic collapsed. And so they had to release their grip. And there were a lot of people who were coming through Czechoslovakia, of course, now Czech Republic and Slovakia, but they were coming through Czechoslovakia into West Germany, and they were everywhere. And you knew where they were because they always burned oil. And so they always had a big cloud of smoke above them. And they were tootling along at 40 kilometers per hour out in the middle of the Autobahn. So you can imagine what the thinking was on that. But it was just floods of them. And then wasn't long after that, the junkyards in West Germany were full of them.
This is a picture from John Kramer, and in an email he sent to me, he said these cars were like lawnmowers, essentially. They were like toy cars with lawnmower engines, and they wouldn't go much above 40 miles an hour.
And they sounded like lawnmowers.
Did they really?
Yes.
Is that
what year was this? Did you say?
I think they were a 2-cylinder engine.
No. What year were you there when you went into East Germany?
I was there in '89 when the wall came down, and I went into East Germany in early '90.
Had you gone earlier in the period?
Well, I used to fly the quarters, when they still had the quarters in late '70s, and through all the procedures that you had to go through to fly in and out of Tempelhof in West Berlin from West Germany. In fact, you had to fly with a flight examiner and get certified to do it because they were so afraid that if you didn't follow all the procedures, you could very easily cause an international incident.
Yeah.
And so it was amazing what was involved in flying the quarters.
And driving in the 70s was even more intriguing. My wife and I were stationed over there from 73 to 76, and
oh, we think you froze.
You had to get called flag orders, so-called because the top of the order had the U.S. flag on it. And they were done in Russian, French, and English. And you had two ways you get in. You were not permitted to fly. That was illegal. You could either take the troop train or you drive. And driving was actively discouraged because the East Germans like to jerk people around. So you'd get an entry time and an exit time. And if you were not out by the exit time, they'd come looking for you. So most people took the troop train. Troop train went at night, and American flags on the side of the train, and the East Germans did not want East German citizens to see a train with an American flag on it driving through East Germany. So we had to travel at night. The flag orders had to be perfect. In other words, no typos, nothing, because they were all examined once the train started. And everything was segregated, by which I mean I was with my wife, but we were not permitted to be in the same car. So I had to sleep with in a Pullman car sort of thing with a Army second lieutenant attached to the Berlin Brigade, and she had to sleep with some women in another car. So it was very different from that standpoint. And going through Checkpoint Charlie at that time was even more interesting because I had to go through in uniform. Barbara was not allowed to be with me. She had to go through a separate part of Checkpoint Charlie. And we were instructed not to talk to the East Germans at all because we didn't recognize East Germany as a legitimate country. And so I went through, they were not allowed to stop us. They were not allowed to do anything at all. They could stop her because she was not military personnel. When we got into East Germany at the time, and remember this is in the mid-70s, to your point, and trouble there left over from World War II, which they had never gotten around to cleaning up. There were still pock marks on the buildings from shells that had hit at that particular time. You have to remember that East Berlin was the crown jewel of the Soviet Empire in 1975. If you got an invitation to travel to and shop in East Berlin and you were a Soviet bloc citizen, you thought you'd died and gone to heaven. But believe me, it was not heaven at all. And shopping there was a fascinating experience. They had a very large department store there. And the shelves went on forever, and there were very few things on the shelves. If you wanted to buy something, you had to stand in a line after you found what you wanted to buy to see whether or not it was actually available in the size that you wanted. And if it was, then you had to go stand in another line to purchase it. And you had to keep receipts for everything because they could stop you on the way back to compare the receipts with how much money you had allegedly brought into East Berlin. The only thing you didn't have to have receipts for were meals. You could eat very inexpensively in East Berlin, and the food wasn't bad. Very, very different time.
Wow, how interesting. John Kramer, you very kindly gave me or sent me a picture of your flag orders. And I want to say hi to your son. Let me say hi to your son before I go to you, John. Hi, Keith. How are you? Good to meet you. You just retired.
I did, yeah.
You look too young to be retired. And so you retired from the Air Force?
I did, yeah.
And what did you do in the Air Force?
So basically aircraft maintenance. I was a crew chief.
Okay, you're crew chief. And did you ever say hoo-wah?
No. We just asked where the hotel was.
Oh man, you are good. You are good. Well, thank you for joining us, Keith. This is great. You're okay. Well, I like you. You raised him well, John. Good sense of humor. Hey, John, I'm going to share with everybody here the picture of you heard Ben mention flag orders and Bill mention flag orders. I guess this is a copy of a flag order?
There's a flag orders when I went to Berlin in 1987 before the wall fell. We went on the troop train and he described it very well. It was very regimented. You traveled at night. The windows were all shaded, so you weren't supposed to look out, but you could peek out every now and then because the train stopped several times on the way between, Frankfurt and Berlin. And then you were there for the period that was on your flag orders. And during that time, we went through Checkpoint Charlie over into East Berlin. And like you said, you had to be in uniform because it was an occupied city.
Now, why have we heard so much? We always hear about Checkpoint Charlie. Ben mentioned Checkpoint Alpha. I guess there was a Checkpoint Bravo also. Why is Checkpoint Charlie the one that we hear about the most? Does anybody know?
Charlie was the one where if you were military personnel going into East Berlin, you went through Checkpoint Charlie. As you can see, the 3 flags above the checkpoint.
Okay. So that was the military entryway. And what do you remember about the fall of the Berlin Wall, John? You were there for that.
I was in Germany from 86 through 92. And in August of 86, I transferred from Ramstein Air Base up to Schierstein compound just east of Wiesbaden. And I got there in August, and the wall fell obviously in November. And throughout Wiesbaden, there were celebrations. Everybody was really happy. And the first that we saw of people from the east coming over is like Ben talked about and the other individual talked about, we started seeing the Trabis on the Autobahn.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you were going on the Autobahn, maybe 100 clicks, and they were maybe going 40 clicks. But I stopped at a rest stop, and Keith probably don't remember this because he was younger. I stopped at a restaurant, and there was a Trabi pulled over, and they had 6 people in this little Trabi. And all they wanted to do was shake your hands and hug you and say, we're back in, West Germany.
Oh, how
They
neat.
were so excited. And then for the weeks after that, that's all you saw was Trabis and people, reuniting with relatives and things like that.
Oh, what an exciting time. Keith, do you remember any of it?
I was going to say, I think the only thing I do remember is the Trabis and just the flood of people and the amount of people they would stuff into them.
How interesting. I know we have Leo West. We also have Al Skrupka. Hey, Al, thank you for joining us. Al was, it's about time we get somebody Army here. We've heard from 3 Air Force veterans. Al, you were in Germany in 1967 and 1969 for 2 years.
Yes, I was. Yeah.
What were you doing with the Army?
I was an infantry company commander, and as you mentioned earlier, with our position there in the late 60s was definitely a defensive posture in Europe, and obviously everybody recognizes the dates as far as Vietnam is concerned too. So our first year, we were pretty busy going out on alerts to train for the eventual somewhat of a invasion of the Russians, which never happened, thank God. So we were pretty busy practicing our actual training. And then the second year, the gold flow crisis hit. What happened there is a lot of money was pulled out of Europe, particularly Germany, with all the armed forces. And the money at that time was switched over to Vietnam to aid the troops there. So it was an interesting 2 years there for sure.
Al, what unit were you with in Germany?
I was in the 8th Division. It was the 2nd Battalion. No, let's see, 2nd of the 13th. And we were in Coleman Barracks, which was right outside of Mannheim.
Okay.
And that's where our position was. We were the infantry battalion. There was a tank battalion stationed there. And then I think there was, might have been some paratroopers attached to one of the units. And the stockade was there. So on one side of the base, it's an old, today it's a abandoned German air base. At the time. And Mannheim was located, somewhat halfway between Heidelberg and Frankfurt. So we were it was a very industrial area, Mannheim. I guess at that time, or during World War II, we pretty much bombed it pretty thoroughly, and all of that. So
sometimes I will hear veterans say, about your era that they got lucky, they got stationed in Germany rather than Vietnam. But there was a real fear and a real concern in the Pentagon during the Vietnam War that the Soviets would use the American preoccupation with Vietnam as an opportunity to invade West Germany, and that the Soviets were going to get much more aggressive in Germany. So actually, where you were was a pretty perilous position in 1967, 68, and 69. Were you like aware of, I mean, what was your thought? Were you worried? Were you scared? Were you,
Most of our when we went out on alert or bivouac too, we would be gone for maybe 3 to 5 days. Places like Grafenwehr and Baumholder, which were massive training areas, similar to the let's say like Fort Benning, Georgia, or Fort Polk, Louisiana. So we have joint exercises primarily with the French, okay, and the British, and just coordinating our efforts just in case. Fortunately, nothing happened, in Germany from that standpoint, as far as going into action.
Yeah. Oh, how interesting.
The major exercise at that time, Todd, was called Reforger.
Yep.
And Reforger meant people came from the States to Grafenwehr and other places like that in great numbers, just to train and to show that we could get troops in there in time if the Germans tried to come through the Fulda Gap.
Yeah. That's right. I forgot about Reforger. That was the big one, and the rumor mill on that one was troops that were already stationed in Germany. Okay, were really what's that one?
Cannon fodder.
Yeah, and that's why it was important to have the U.S. troops be able to position themselves and get over from the States into Germany. Yeah, I see Fulda over there. That was another big training area in West Germany at the time.
Yeah, Fulda was for people who are interested, the Fulda Gap was the route that the Russian tanks would have taken when they invaded West Germany. It was, I guess, a low-lying, floodplain that tanks could get around. There was a little town called Fulda that would be, one route. Then there was a northern route, and so the expectation was World War III was going to start right here in this strategic corridor. Here's another, diagram of what the invasion would have looked like. The one that never came, but was definitely expected. And you were trained to fight, Al.
Yeah, defensive posture,
ready for the invasion.
Hey, Todd,
Peter, yes.
I was just going to comment when you talked about Fulda. When I was in the 3rd Infantry, I was the deputy G2, the intelligence officer for the division, and at that time we were very fortunate because we were the first division over there to get the M1 and the Bradley fighting vehicles. So when I was there from 83 to 86, we were the fastest moving division in Germany, and we figured we were going to have to pull up stakes and move north, either to Fulda or the Northern Plain, where we expected even bigger force to come across the Northern Plain in mass.
Right.
But I was going to ask John. I'll have to come back on the question. I just had a lapse. But I was going to say I was there 83 to 86, and with the armaments we had in that 3rd Infantry, and we were actually going to be the reserve because we were going to be pulled offline and moved someplace where they needed us. And we were very confident. Our tank crews were tremendous and everything, and we felt that we could beat the crap out of the Russians. No doubt about it. We were worried more about our families. We were more worried about attack nukes being used or chemical weapons and those kind of things. But tank on tank or anything like that would have been no problem with the 3rd Infantry Division. I'll be honest with you. And I think I told you this before, and I came home in 86 on Thanksgiving, and people asked me about Germany. I said, the wall's coming down in 5 years, because I was always on the border. And everybody, and I said, I'm telling you, they're not coming across. We talked to line crossers, we talked to defectors, we talked to business people and all this kind of stuff. I said, nobody's coming across that border. They don't want any parts of this. And they said, "Are you crazy or something?" I said, 5 years. Well, it came down in 3 years. But that was the confidence we had in the 80s. And then, like I say, we backed it up with our Pershing II missiles when they were pushed in there. And then all of a sudden, here comes stealth technology started coming along. And then the Russians had to the Soviets couldn't even stay with it.
Right, right.
Well,
Oh, is
they
that
couldn't
interesting?
afford it. And in the 70s, we didn't have that level of confidence, quite frankly.
Yeah.
It was a different time period. The other thing I'll add, Todd, for those who spent some time in Berlin, at least in the 70s, and I'm sure in the 60s, it was the most vibrant city in the world. They lived right next door to all these Russian divisions, and those people knew how to have a wonderful time. They did not let the proximity to the Russian troops trouble them very much. They just lived life to the fullest.
Yeah.
It sounds trite to say it, but it's true.
Yeah, it was a city on the edge, and that was the reputation. Certainly, it had when I was growing up as a kind of live today because you don't know if you're going to be around tomorrow. Leo West, Leo West served in Germany. Hello, Leo. I'm going to ask you to unmute in the Army, and I'm going to bring up your pictures here too. How are you, Leo?
Oh, pretty good.
When were you in Germany again?
I wasn't in Germany. I visited.
Oh, Austria.
I was in Austria.
Austria. I'm sorry about that.
And I was there in '53 when Stalin died.
Ooh.
And that was a worrisome time for about a week because Beria was the head of the police.
Yes.
He disappeared. They didn't know where he was. And they thought he was leading a group into Austria. And we were on alert for a few days while that was going on. But other than that, we didn't have too much. I mean, where I was, I wasn't involved in any kind of thing. Our main mission was to get the civilians out of Austria if anything happens. But originally, our depot was about 5 miles from the Russian zone near Linz, Austria. And we moved to Salzburg, which made us 100 miles. And we said, well, now we're 10 seconds away from their jets. Well, we were only 1 second.
1 second. And here's a picture of Leo from when he was in the Army. You can see he hasn't changed very much at all. Have you, Leo? And Leo, you have the greatest bunch of wonderful photos that I do want to share. You've shared with them on Wednesday morning with our virtual breakfast. And I think I'd love to do that again here. That is so interesting. Peter Fens, you said you were also in Germany for the fall of the Berlin Wall. I hadn't realized that. How are you, Peter?
I'm good, Todd. How are you doing?
Good.
Hey, I wanted to, Veterans Day, I watched that online. You did a really good job on that. That was an excellent job.
I want to say yes. Thank you for that compliment there, Peter. I want to say, I'm Ellie. I hope we do get the recording of that event because I thought it was superb. We had Julia Parsons. We had Roland Glenn. Roland, you were fantastic. We had Larry Kirby, and it was like we had these 3 World War II veterans who were so eloquent, so articulate, so interesting. Just sharing what they saw as the most important parts of their stories. And the number of emails and phone calls I got about that Veterans Day event, I think eclipsed anything that I've gotten before. It was really that the people who watched it were really, really moved by it. So thank you very much, Roland. You're here on the Zoom side. Thank you for joining us on Veterans Day from Kittery, Maine. It was terrific. So anyhow, Peter, thank you for that. But you were in Germany 86 to 90?
Yeah, my first 4 years I was in the military, I was a counterintelligence agent. So I arrived in 86, like summer of 86. And I didn't wear a uniform for the first 4 years I was there. We were the guys that dressed up in suits and ties, and I actually wasn't even on an American base. I was stationed on a British base.
Huh.
And that's how I actually met my wife. She was in the British Army.
Right.
So our job was to try to run down East German spies, Russian spies. If anybody that was over there during the Cold War will remember the Soviet exchange mission, otherwise known as SOXMAS, or conversely SMELM, which I can't remember what the acronym actually stood for.
Yeah, that was the U.S. military liaison mission.
Yeah, well, it was SMLM.
Yeah, you
or
smell
the other acronym was SOXMAS, MS, Soviet Exchange Mission.
Yeah.
And if anybody reported seeing these guys, we were the ones who kind of jumped through our butts to go try to find them. There was one actual time, I guess there was a small concern back, in the 70s and 80s. You couldn't drive 30 miles in Germany without hitting a small camp, or Kaserne in German is what it's called. And we got called to this one, and we go there, we flash our badges, and we're like, trying to find out what's going on. And what happened was these guys, the Soviets, they had to drive around in these, usually they were nice big Mercedes. Of course, the taxis over there were nice big Mercedes as well. So they drove around in these nice big Mercedes with the Russian, the hammer and sickle flags on them.
Yeah.
And what they would do is, we had one case where they drove onto a small Kaserne. The gate guard opened up the gate, saluted them. They drove around in through all around it, drove back out. The gate guard saluted them again, like they thought it was a general or something, So we had a lot of those we had to respond to. But I was actually there. I was about to change jobs from MI to become an MP, and that was like late of 1990. And while everybody was talking about how great the wall coming down, everybody was all happy and all that. The circle that I was in, I was American MI. We worked very closely with the British MI, and we worked very closely with the Militärschaftsdienst, which is the German MI. None of us were happy about the wall coming down, not at all, because once the wall came down, there was a flood of East Germans in West Germany. Jeff was talking about how the Third ID had the first M1 Abrams and all that.
Yeah.
When those tanks first came over to Germany, their armor, the way the armor was constructed, I'm not an expert on that, but I do know that the way their armor was constructed, it was considered classified.
Yeah.
So what would happen is we would get reports that civilians were taking pictures. If they were going out to training, we'd get reports that civilians were taking pictures of this, and that was not allowed. And Jeff's shaking his head because he knows you want to get hemmed up real quick, take a picture of one of those vehicles. So we were the guys that were running around on the outside. We were trying to catch whoever we could. We used to mess with the units. When I first got to Germany, we had this blonde agent, and she was a knockout. And we would send her in, and she spoke German. And we would send her down to where, now we covered the nuclear sites especially. So the soldiers that were on the nuclear sites, they would go down into the German towns, and they'd have a party, and they'd get shit-faced. And
we do have a 13-year-old in the room, Peter, just to remind you.
Yeah, I just remembered that. That's the worst I'll do. But she would go in, and if you ever seen spy movies, The Honey Pot, we wouldn't take it very far, but she would, get information off of them. And then about a week later, we would show up for every year. You had to have what's called a Saida brief. And that was subversion and espionage directed against the army. And back in those days, we were the ones that did the briefing. Well, you should have seen all these guys trying to crawl under the chairs when
Oh
we were
my.
walking in, and I can't even remember what her name was. I'd have to check with some other guys I was stationed with, but you know, we'd come walking in our suits and stuff, and they'd see her, and you'd see these guys just sort of going, you know, trying to find a corner to hide in.
Oh my.
So,
That is so interesting, Peter. Because yeah, I mean, you know, you could watch TV series about that kind of, you know, espionage, but to hear that it really happened and that you were a, you are a part of it is fascinating.
It was, I mean, you know, it was interesting because like the stuff nowadays that you see, it doesn't equate because we didn't have well, we had a cell phone. It was the big brick. We had a pager and a cell phone, and you know, we knew who was on duty because you were lugging this half a suitcase around with you if you wanted to just go and, you know, have a Coke while your buddies were drinking.
Right.
But I had a very unique experience because I was an American stationed on a British base, the only single American living on the British base in the middle of a huge German city. We were stationed in Dusseldorf.
Oh.
And Dusseldorf is like the second largest city in Germany, I think. And, you know, it was considered the capital or the fashion capital of the West, next to Paris. So, I mean, here I am, 18, 19 years old, going down to the Altstadt in the German city after the fashion shows. There weren't any Americans around. So when they'd start talking to me and they realized I was American, I was, you know, not only to the Brits that I was stationed with, I was also unique to the Germans because there weren't many Americans around there. And they were always like, what are you doing here? And if they got too quizzical, I wouldn't admit to being an American. I would say I was a Canadian. And you know, it was just kind of like to kind of throw them off because, you know, if I wasn't, the only real Americans that were there were like with the big corporations because it was a huge German city.
Right.
So, but it was very interesting.
This is fascinating. Thank you, Peter. Yeah, Jeff. And I would just want to invite people before you say anything, Jeff, I want to invite people to, if you have a question, please just feel free to ask a question, put a question in the comments in Facebook Live, or just speak up here if you're on the Zoom side. And certainly if you have a story, and I'm going to call on several people, speak up. Jeff, yes.
Just a real quick one. When Peter was talking about the USMLM, the U.S. United States Military Liaison Mission, they have them on both sides. The Russians had them and the Americans had them. And the whole purpose was to provide liaison between the Army, the United States Army or the Allied armies and the Russian Army. And they would stay in tight, you know, so we didn't have incidences and things like that. They could probably squelch something before something really got out of hand. And I was lucky enough to go to Potsdam where they had the USMLM, the US side, where they were stationed on the east side. And it was like a big fraternity house. We went to this big Victorian home on this lake and there was like 10 guys there and it was like a big fraternity house. And these guys would go out on mission and they'd be in their souped up Mercedes. And then they'd have these big long telescopic lenses on their cameras and everything. And we used to, as intelligence officers, we used to say, hey, I need a picture of this tank, or I need a picture of this bridge. I need a picture of this. And these guys would go running around out there in East Germany and that stuff and high speed through, and they'd take their pictures and get back to wherever they get away from the Russians or the East Germans. And I don't know if it happened during Peter's tour or my tour. I'm trying to remember, but one of our officers, he was over there with USMLM, and he was over there taking pictures in a warehouse area where they had Russian tanks. And he was taking a picture, and usually what happens, they just make a big deal out of it. They take you prisoner, they'd interrogate you, send you back after 3 days to the other side and say, don't do that again type stuff. And so what happened in this situation, this major was taking a picture through a window of a warehouse over there, the Russian tanks. And this one like 18-year-old private, he was on guard duty, and he just panicked. He shot the guy.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, we lost this major.
You know, when that happened in 1985, in March of 85, it was Major Nicholson. Major Nicholson was the only casualty from that.
Yeah.
He was actually shot by a Soviet.
Yeah. Yeah, it seemed like an 18-year-old kid. He just panicked and shot him. You know, one of those kind of things. But these guys, I mean, they used to run, when I was in the 3rd Infantry, I used to send a list of information requirements, and I'd say, I need a picture of this, I need to know this, I need to know that. And they'd go out and find it, you know, and get it for us and everything. And both sides were doing this. And when they talked about the Russians on the Autobahn, that was always the big joke, would be in our convoys, and they'd be out there snooping around our vehicles, and would hem them in at a mark plots or park plots, would hem them in, so they couldn't keep going wherever they were going. We just pulled them up, and then we'd call the Polizei, and the Polizei would come in and interrogate them and all this stuff and just mess them up. We used to do
Spy
that all the
versus
time.
spy.
Yeah.
I want to, on a more serious note, though, those missions, we had them on both sides. There was a couple incidents between 88 and 89, I know from the British side as well, that they got, the Soviet side, they got roughed up a bit, and then they turned around and they did the same to ours. So it was a very much a give. While it seemed like a game, it was a give and take. And one of the things we always briefed was, do not mess with these guys, because what would happen had an equal effect on our guys. And somebody had mentioned, Todd, about the Stasi.
Yes.
And,
yeah, the Stasi, the East German secret police, which were very powerful and very large.
I actually had got to drink schnapps with a Stasi guy one time. I went on a mission as a young soldier to East Berlin, and to a training in East Germany actually, and I had to go through Checkpoint Charlie. And when I went through in my uniform, these are the days when monochrome monitors, right? Well, the only thing I remember was when they ran my name on the list. On the East German side, it came up with a big red bar lighting up around it, which normally meant, it was a signifier that I was an intelligence guy. And so when it lit up, they were like, he was like, you stand there. And I spoke a little bit of German, and he told me, you stand there. And next thing you know, these two guys show up like from the frickin' movies in a black leather trench coat. I kid you not. They were our escort, and they escorted us. So it was, it was just, and then here's the other thing that a lot of people don't realize was going on in Germany at the time. So in 86, when I first got there was a couple other organizations. Jeff will know who these guys are. The Red Army faction. Yep. They were the kind of the kids of the Baader-Meinhof gang, which was the 70s. But there was also the IRA, the Irish Republican Army. Now remember, the Brits were heavy in the north, which meant the IRA were messing with the Brits in the north. There was an Irish pub in Dusseldorf that if you were a British soldier, you couldn't go into, but because I wasn't a British soldier, I could go into. So the first time I went into the Irish pub, guy hands me a glass of Guinness from across the bar. I'm with another MI guy, and he says, "Welcome to Germany, Pete." And I was like, I don't even know who this guy is. I haven't been there like 2 months. The guy said next to me, his name was Ian. He was an MI guy from the British side. He said, "Leave work at the door, you'll be fine. Come to find out later, he was an IRA hitman who had just shot a major back in Great Britain, and he was on a cooling off period." That's what they did. They sent them around Europe to cool off. Yeah, that's where I got my first Guinness from, in Germany, in an Irish bar.
Chris Parolo, you had a question?
No, not a question here, but I needed to chime in on this. In the Cold War, the Navy, Sixth Fleet, and the NATO forces had the southern flank. If anything were to happen, there was the southern flank in the Mediterranean, and they committed 2 aircraft carriers to the Mediterranean for decades, bringing to bear about 170 aircraft. And it was the primary mission of the Soviet Navy. And remember now, that's a confined space compared to the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean. It was the primary objective of the Soviet Navy to destroy those 2 aircrafts within minutes of each other as the tanks poured across the frontier. So we were constantly trying to find out where every single one of their vessels was. And they were constantly exercising and targeting and training to destroy those two aircraft carriers. So that was a source of pressure during the Cold War, which did not let up until after it was over, before they whittled it down to one carrier in the Med, and then on to the Gulf with most of the assets. But that was a key part of the Navy participation in that theater, is to have the southern flank and to hold the Mediterranean in any kind of a Third World War.
Boy, is that a wonderful addition to my understanding of what a med cruise means. Because usually, if I hear Navy sailor say, "What I enjoyed a med cruise," I'm thinking that it's a cruise, and it turns out, yeah, you were there to fight a war.
No, I tell everybody. They say, "What did you do in active duty?" I say, "I was chasing Russians around the Med. That was about it."
Right. Oh, how interesting. Tom Stevenson, did you want to add anything? What was your life like in the Cold War in a submarine?
I'll jump on what Chris just said, and definitely live stuff over there. I was, at the time that he's talking about, the late 80s, 86 to 88, I was nav ops on USS Albuquerque, SSN 706. She was one of the first 688s that was really doing hot and heavy.
What's a 688?
688 fast attack.
Okay.
Los Angeles fast attack submarine.
Okay.
I was nav ops, and that was the most challenging navigation I ever had to do. Was over in the Mediterranean.
Could you explain for somebody like me who really doesn't know what navigation entails, what was challenging about it?
Well, if you think about it, you were driving around a very fast ship in a basin with a lot of features on the bottom. And depending on where you are, those features can get pretty shallow pretty fast. I mean, think about the geography of just getting through the Straits of Gibraltar in the first place, and trying to keep yourself as hidden as you possibly can. And then trying to get from one side of the Med to the other side of the Med while you're doing your job. And that's, at the time, the navigation was very challenging, of course, when you're doing that submerged. And a lot of people did. And I guess the best thing I could say about not the best thing, but the most striking thing to me was, throughout the Cold War, I served in submarines from 78 until 97. And every time we went to sea, we were at war, as far as we were concerned. Especially for submariners, and Chris could probably back me up on this. Submariners have no friends.
Right.
Everybody would be more than happy to jump on you, no matter what side you're on, because it's just too hard to tell who's the bad guy and who's the good guy.
Right.
Unless you have the intelligence.
That's why the bond among submariners is so intense. What I've found. Can I ask you? Let me ask a stupid question, Tom. Were there Russian submarines in the Mediterranean around you the whole time?
I can't talk about that. Even today, I can't talk about that.
Really?
Yes.
I'll take that as a yes.
Let's just say what Chris just said is absolutely true. And if you think about how you would, if you were the Soviet Union, how you would best go about taking out an aircraft carrier, you put two and two together.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Oy, oy.
Yeah, and if the best thing to find a submarine is another submarine, well, you can add that into the equation.
Got it. I'm starting to get a picture. Boy,
changing the subject, Todd, for obvious reasons.
Thank you.
People do need to keep in mind that in the 70s, there were terrorist activities that took place primarily in Germany and in Italy. You had General Singlov being captured in Italy by, I think it was the Red Brigades, and he escaped. But back in Germany, you had the attempt on the life of Alexander Haig. They set a bomb in the road. His car had passed over it. It was exploded. He wasn't hurt, but they tried to kill him. You had the blowing up of the bar, I forget what city it was in Germany, that killed a bunch of U.S. servicemen.
Yep.
Yeah, it was in West Berlin.
There was another one too. I know there was one in West Berlin, but I think there was a second one too around 1974, 75. Maybe I'm wrong. But that was the sort of thing that would make you nervous in some places. Now, if you were stationed in an out-of-the-way place like Ben and I were in Bitburg, it wasn't so much of a problem because they wanted to do things in areas where the media was available so that get the maximum publicity for doing the whole thing. But they were alive and well and crazy as anything.
I was going to say, Todd, that when I was there, Weiner Meinhof was active. That when I was down in 3rd Infantry down in Würzburg, the Weiner Meinhof gang, the only thing they did down there is they blew up a bank or robbed a bank. That was the only thing they did, and I toured down there. The reason why they really stayed away from Würzburg, where we were, was because that was their recreation area. That was where they went to take leave or whatever. They went skiing in Bavaria, so they weren't too active down where I was. But
Right.
other places, like you said, Frankfurt and those kind of places, they were pretty active.
I want to ask Jack Kerr. I think your iPhone here, Jack. If that is you, you could unmute yourself and speak up if you like. I think that's you. I'm getting a glimpse of somebody who looks like Jack Kerr. So, Jack, if you're there, I think there you are. Please do feel free to speak up. And while you're getting your mic unmuted, I do want to go to Chuck Somerville also. Chuck, you were Air Force. You've spoken before at our events. You served in the heart of the Cold War with nukes here. And if you want to unmute yourself, you can share. Were you ever in Germany, Chuck?
Only as a civilian touring through for pleasure.
Okay, you were not stationed there at all.
No, I was stationed my tour of duty in Europe was 18 months at RAF Bryce Norton, which is outside of Oxford, England.
Okay, Oxford, England, and you were a member of a B-52 crew.
I was a member of a squadron called the 2nd ADS. It was sort of a funny title to it. It stood for Aviation Depot Squadron. But we were charged with preparing nuclear weapons to be loaded into B-52s, ready to go to war.
Like one of these nuclear weapons that I'm showing on my screen.
Yeah, that one there is a Mark 36. It was the last hydrogen bomb I worked on as an electronics technician. And it was 1,000 times more powerful than Hiroshima.
Man alive. I think you're the ones who told me about Moscow, Mali. I mean, we've heard about Axis Sally and Hanoi Hannah, but Moscow, Mali is a new one to me.
Yeah, Moscow, Mali was the sort of agitator person from the Russians. And I encountered Moscow, Mali when I was being transferred from Bergstrom Air Force Base, Austin, Texas, on the TDY to Alston Air Force Base, Fairbanks, Alaska. And believe it or not, I was being transported up there, not with my squadron. I was going to be joining the squadron up there. But my trip up there was in a KB-29. And the KB-29 was an in-flight refueling machine after World War II that was doing all the refueling for the B-47s and B-36s. But when we landed in Alston Air Force Base, landed about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and a couple of the guys from my squadron came over to get me. And he said, we want to get you processed because we have a little surprise for you. Well, getting processed was no big deal. All it meant was getting a bunk and going to chow. But this guy had one of these Zenith transoceanic radios, you could get the whole world on them. And he tuned in the 7 o'clock Moscow Mali news, and she read off yours truly, name, rank, and serial number as having arrived that day.
Oh, Moscow Mali knew that you were arriving in Alaska that day.
Yeah, but here's the thing about it. Everybody else on the line tonight will verify this. When you get transported or transferred from point A to point B, somebody has to cut orders. On those orders is a CC list of about 50 people. They probably just sent a copy over to Moscow Mali.
Still pretty spooky to hear your name being read from Moscow.
Yeah. So, up there, very close to Russia in itself.
Yes,
But,
that's right.
No, I had a good time. No great experiences in Europe outside of what I was telling you about.
Roland, Glenn, why don't you unmute yourself there?
I had an incident related to the falling of the wall. I'm holding a little stone in my hand, which is a chip of the wall, and it was given to me by a friend who was a really good buddy. And when he gave it to me, he said that when the wall fell, that a lot of the kids started grabbing up these little pieces of the wall and selling them to the GIs to take home as souvenirs. So that's the story behind this little pebble. But I said to him, I said, that must have been one of the most exciting moments of your life when that wall came down. And he says, no, it wasn't. It was one of the saddest days of my life. We should be supporting the government of East Berlin, not West Berlin. And so we got into a rather long conversation. We were into archery in those days, and we would go along this trail and then sit down and we would talk. And he would tell me about what his view was of communism compared to the form of government that we had in the United States. About this time, there was a knock on my door, and when I went there, there were two men standing outside, and they introduced themselves as FBI agents, and they showed me badges to prove who they were, and they asked if they could come in and talk for a few minutes. They told me that they understood that I had a friend who made frequent trips to Europe, and I said, yeah, that was true. That my friend was an author, and he went to Europe to do research for his historical novels. And these guys said to me, has it ever occurred to you that he might be a spy? And I said, that's the furthest thing that I'd ever think about this guy. So the conversation kind of ended, and I talked it over with my wife. What should I do about this? Because we were very friendly with this family, had kids in common. And so I decided I would go to my friend and tell him about this incident, which is what I did. And he said, oh, Roland, he said, don't think about it. He said, I get those kinds of accusations every now and then. But he said, I really believe that we made a political blunder to support West Berlin instead of East Berlin. And so that's my little side story on the Berlin Wall. I've never been to Germany, and all I have is that memory passed on to me by a buddy who, to this day, I consider one of the best friends of my lifetime. He is passed now. He dropped in on the streets of London one day on one of his research trips. So who knows?
What an interesting story. And the fall of, or the reunification of Germany, we kind of forget how controversial that was. Margaret Thatcher wasn't happy about that. A lot of Europe wasn't happy about that. I remember very well being in graduate school at the time, there being a lot of international students from Holland and France. Boy, were they opposed to the reunification of Germany. There was an opposition party in East Germany that was also opposed to it, and they were trying to rebuild a liberal democracy in Germany, in East Germany. So it was a very complicated situation on the ground in Germany at the time. I don't know if Jack, if you want to speak up, please do feel free. just to speak
Yeah,
up.
I'm here.
Hey, Jack, how are you?
Good.
When were you in Germany?
Well, I was going to tell you, I was a brand new spanking lieutenant, maybe 3 months in grade. And I went into Germany in April of 1950, late April 1953. And because the war ended and the Army wanted to get rid of all of us guys who weren't real soldiers, I got out early in October. However, the summer of 53 was kind of eventful for me because I was with the company. First of all, I was with a part of the Army that doesn't exist anymore, which is the Army Security Agency. And our job was twofold. There was one half of it monitoring American communication so that we didn't make any mistakes. And the other half was to find what the other guys were saying and see what mistakes they did make from a communications intelligence standpoint. But my story, I'll keep it brief. I was assigned to a communications intercept company called the 331st Com Recon Company, stationed in Gießen, which is a little bit north of Frankfurt. And the wall was certainly in effect, and I never did see Checkpoint Charlie because of my military intelligence classification, I wasn't even allowed to go to Berlin. However, I had a mission as this young spanking lieutenant to go up into what was then the British zone to try to find good radio intercept locations out in the countryside, so that for the following summer, this was in April or May, that summer they could find a place that set up a field unit that could do everybody training to listen to the other side. Now, the first interesting part happened. They sent me up and they said, when you get up to Hanover, report to British Army headquarters. This is in the British zone of Germany at that time. They said, report to British Army headquarters tomorrow or whenever you get there and let them know you're there. Yes, sir, I said, saluting my company commander. Off I go with 3 other gentlemen who were we became a reconnaissance team. And on June the 3rd, I reported to British Army headquarters, which was locked up tighter than a drum because it was coronation day for Queen Elizabeth. So anyway, we went on from there. Now, it wasn't normally known, but there was, in order to define the east-west border up in the British zone or the northern part of the country, there was a 10-meter wide strip plowed in the land all the way from the top of the American zone to the top of the British zone. 10 meters wide, barbed wire both sides, electrified in the middle. So we had to stay on that side to accomplish our mission. And unfortunately, we ran into a lot of people that were trapped on the other side, because they couldn't get through. But I spent that entire summer until October liaisoning with a British unit commanded by a Sandhurst graduate Captain Major Pat Walker and his Lieutenant Patrick Robertson from Aberdeen, Scotland. And we had a great time together, and I'll never forget my time. And it was a wonderful, almost a paid vacation on the United States Army. And in October, they determined that they had too many new second lieutenants. And so anybody wanted to get out, write a letter to the adjutant general, and you'll get you out. It took 30 days before I got out and got sent home.
Oh, my. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Jack. And can we see your face? Why don't you put your phone so we can see? There you go. There you go.
Am I on? Okay.
Yeah. We can see you.
I'll be 91 years old in 2 weeks.
Oh, God bless you.
All right, Jack.
How wonderful. Happy birthday in 2 weeks. Hey, Sean Hall, you have a announcement to make?
Oh, yeah, I put it over here in the chat. For those of you who joined us last week on Wednesday, I believe it was last week, Rob Zell is a playwright. He is having his new play Redux read on Thursday night with actors through Pittsburgh Public Theater. I put the link in there. There's a suggested donation minimum of $10 to watch the reading. But it is about 2 Vietnam veterans who come back together after 45 years. He came on our program to chat with veterans about the story, and he's interested to hear veterans' reactions to the story. So if you're interested, if you would love to watch a play reading, I'd say go ahead and check it out. And then I believe Rob will be interested in connecting with our network to hear your reactions to the play and see if you feel like he was able to bring some reality to that.
And I hope, we're getting close to the close of this program. I hope that many of you, if you're able, will join us on Wednesday morning to continue this conversation. I think there are more stories here in this room than we could cover in 90 minutes. Larry Googans, what were you going to say?
Yeah, could I plug one thing? Our for anybody that's a member of VBA Chapter 862, we have canceled the meeting at the Rochester VFW for obvious reasons. However, I am going to have a meeting beginning at 6 o'clock. I'm going to go on what you have, Todd, and the 6 o'clock happy hour and a 7 o'clock meeting on Zoom, and I'll send out the information, or actually Lee will send it out here this evening or tomorrow morning. So Todd, thank you for letting me do that. I know there were a lot of members of our chapter here, but
yeah,
you go to the VFW on Wednesday evening.
So don't go to the VFW on Wednesday evening. VBA Chapter 862 will be meeting on Zoom, and Lee Corfield, because he does all the work, even though you get the glory.
I get the medals.
You get
John, could I interrupt one very briefly?
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Lee or Larry. Yes.
John, one of the things I wanted to mention, right after I got to Europe in the company that I was assigned to, I met a gentleman by the name of Lieutenant Vernon Crabtree. Vernon Crabtree was a survivor of the Bataan Death March. And he was pardon my French, a real goddamn soldier. He was a wonderful guy, and just he was only a first lieutenant. I don't know, he probably was an enlisted man during the Philippine thing, but he was a hell of a fine gentleman to know.
Oh, how interesting. Gosh, the history that is in this Zoom room. And John Kramer, I feel badly because you sent me such great stories and photos. I know you have a lot of stories about Germany and the Cold War, and especially a C-130 project. So these are look at these, John Kramer. These are the East German soldiers.
Yeah, they're marching in front of what was the East German Memorial in East Berlin.
Okay.
That's the guard. Changing of the guard.
Mm-hmm.
And when you went to East Berlin, you had to spend East Berlin Deutschmarks because you couldn't take them back with you. If you took them back, they were worthless. And I got stuck with a Zen mark, 10 marks.
Now it's a museum piece. Are these crosses of people who were killed trying to?
Yes, that's on the West Berlin side. But they were people that have been killed trying to cross and didn't make it.
Boy, oh boy.
And that's the Soviet War Memorial, which the Germans ain't too fond of.
Yes,
for
right.
obvious reasons.
Right. And then this is the famous Brandenburg Gate.
That's the Brandenburg Gate, how it looked back then. Now it's just I went back to Berlin in about 8 years ago, and now it's just a big commercial area.
Boy, how interesting. And I know you have other stories. John Kramer, I hope you'll come back and share an interesting story you have about a C-130 project. I hope all of you will join us again. Jack Kerr, I hope your son, Keith Kramer, I hope you'll join us again. This is, and House Skorupka, thank you so much for making the effort to join us here on Zoom tonight. This is really wonderful getting this group together. I know Henry Shopke had some comments and questions. We could have him share some more next time he's there. We will be back for our virtual breakfast on Wednesday at 9 a.m. Same Zoom link. Please do join us if you can. We will carry on and continue this conversation. Hope also to see you on Sunday night for our conversation with Gail Halverson, the candy bomber from the Berlin airlift. That'll be actually Sunday afternoon, Sunday at 4 p.m. All right. Thank you all, guys.